Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar all about grants and eligibility. My name is 𝗵𝗶𝗿𝗀, I am Group Partnership Manager at MPA, and I will be joined by our subject matter expert, Dr. 𝘄𝗵𝗁, who is our Head of Grant Services.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Dr. 𝘄𝗵𝗁, and I'm the Head of Grant Services here at MPA. So I've been working in grants for over 10 years now, and I've won grants for projects that I've wanted to do myself, and also a number of lots for others looking at getting grants for their company. So what we're going to be looking at today specifically are what are innovation grants and where you can find them, and to help you understand the eligibility criteria.
𝘄𝗵𝗁, I wanted to ask you about a statistic that I read recently, which was from the latest report from the 𝗴𝗹𝗶𝗺 Institute. It looked at all of the eligible companies that could be claiming through grants, and it said that only 18% currently are, which to me seems like quite a low number. So I was hoping you could add some context in terms of like what you've seen over the last few years with grant funding.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is a surprising statistic in a way that only 18% of scale-ups are accessing innovation grants. I think there's lots of different reasons why that's happening. For example, the grant landscape can be really confusing, and I think historically equity funding has been more attractive and maybe a priority over non-dilutive funding like grants. But yeah, I think generally it can be a bit of a confusing approach to fundraising as to knowing where to start, where to find it, and how to access it, really. We've got a question from Molly, which is what is equity funding? So that is funding from venture capital or angels, which is where a percentage of your company would be owned by a VC, and so then they would be a shareholder. So that's kind of a source of funding, kind of in the sort of like short medium term, in that they want that return on investment really quickly.
I'm now going to share my screen, so 𝘄𝗵𝗁, you can start with your presentation. I feel like this is a really great place to start, especially following on from some of the information that we've just learned, looking at the basics of why grants are really good for SMEs.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, grants are a really good option for SMEs, but also for some startups and also scale-ups as well. It really helps to fuel growth, innovation, and progress for a company. So the benefits are they're non-repayable, so a little bit different to the way that other forms of funding work, like loans and to some extent equity funding. And it's non-dilutive, so that means that you don't have to worry about giving any part of the company away or having part of it owned by other shareholders outside of your current board, and also it helps to mitigate risk. So with grant funding, the main aim is to fund risky activity, particularly technically risky activity, which other forms of funding don't really kind of like equity funding and loans, because they might not get that return on investment. But what I really like about it is that it stimulates innovation. So with grants, what I really like about it is that you can dream big, you can do those projects that you've always kind of wanted to do, particularly to make your product or service really competitive.
Great, thank you. And I think a point on Molly's question about equity funding, and something you mentioned is about retaining control of your business and not bringing in those external stakeholders.
Yeah, definitely. So it just means with grants, it's just you don't kind of have that to kind of worry about, really.
Great.
Okay, so just to kind of give you an overview as to the types of grants that are available and what the grant landscape looks like, there's 4 groups of grants. So first of all, we've got open competitions. So you might have heard of the Innovate UK Smart Grant. So this is really competitive because it's open to any innovation and any industry. But in terms of it being a last resort, because it is so competitive, it means that the chances of winning are lower compared to other forms of grants. So it has that risk kind of associated with it. So if there's no themed competitions, which I'll kind of go on to next, then the Smart Grant can be a good option. Its main focus is on what it kind of terms as rapid commercialization. So what it wants to see is that it's a very strong value proposition, very innovative, kind of world-leading, game-changing innovation, and that you've got the right team to overcome those technical risks and commercial risks. And immediately after the project, you'll be launching that particular product into the market. The other types of grants that are available are regional or government funding. So this means that they're very, very specific types of funding, in that there's very specific objectives to what they're trying to achieve from that kind of pot of money available. So you'll see these through the Innovate UK website, and also research councils and government departments. Then we have local grants. So 𝗵𝗶s, which are the local enterprise partnerships, they're going to be changing, I think, from next week. So you need to kind of keep an eye on what's happening in your local area, because in sort of Cranfield, Milton Keynes, where we're based, or Newport Pagnell, where we're based, that is the 𝘄𝗵𝗆, so South East Midlands Local Enterprise Partnership, and that is going to be, I think that's going into the West Northamptonshire Council, but some aren't being merged, some are. So that is a good form of funding, particularly for capital expenditure, local growth, innovation, but it's very much tied to the local strategies and what they're trying to achieve, very kind of hyper-local, kind of on that level. And then almost on the opposite end of the scale, we've got huge projects which are kind of pan-European. So here the budgets are very big, and the teams tend to be spread across Europe. So in terms of the application process, that can be quite complex and long. It can take about sort of 6 weeks to write one of those applications, but it just means that the budget is a lot bigger, kind of 2 million upward, really. So just kind of looking at the specific question of this webinar, which are what are innovation grants. So kind of bearing that landscape in mind, just wanted to go into a bit more detail as to what innovation grants are. So they are different from business grants. So business grants might be to help you, like low carbon workspace. It's got a very specific aim, but there's not necessarily any innovation happening there. So innovation grants are different because the purpose of the grants are to contribute towards society, or societal, economic and technological advancement. So the government sometimes has particular strategies that it's working on to ensure that the UK is, at the top of the game for that particular area. So if you take artificial intelligence, for example, and net zero, those things are a prime concern for the government at the moment. So that is orientating the grants kind of in that area, because those need to contribute towards helping society, the economy and the technology reach those particular strategies. And then we have how grants are different to other forms of finance. So it kind of links to the initial part that we kind of spoke about, which is why grants are good for SMEs. So they do have specific objectives and priorities which are set by the funding bodies. So they have their own agendas as to what they want from the funding, particularly around themed. So you'll see that they're very specific in terms of the scope. They encourage innovation, which other forms of funding don't necessarily do. And they have research and development on targeted areas. So at the moment, that is like transport, construction, manufacturing and things. So it just means that the grants are there to have R&D on those particular areas, because we need to innovate to become sort of leaders, sort of going back to that sort of wider strategy. The grants can be used for R&D, so this is really important because this then affects the eligible costs in an innovation grant. It can't be really used for business as usual or high capital expenditure. So it's there to help your business grow, be competitive, go into different markets, maybe try an existing solution in a new way, upskilling, kind of really enabling innovation and technology adoption particularly of what you're trying to do, which might be in an emerging market and completely world leading and game changing. So why grants might not be a good fit is because the eligible costs are very, very limited because it is around pure R&D and innovation. The funding isn't available immediately. It can take a few months for that funding to become available, and it usually is paid in arrears. So that means that you need to have match funding available, particularly liquid sort of cash available to pay for the beginning part of the project, particularly the first 3 months. And also, if your business is very small, then you have to consider the opportunity cost of grants and the administrative burden that comes with running the grants as well. And also whether the funding body objectives align with the strategy of your business. So innovation grants can open up a lot of opportunity and help you innovate, but they should be kind of used with all these kind of limitations in mind.
Thank you. I have a question from the audience on how you can use this funding. So someone is asking about whether this funding can be used for marketing, so getting your product or service in front of the right audience, or commercialization of products or services.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one I get quite frequently. So with R&D and innovation, with the Smart Grant, a key part of that is the rapid commercialization. So what you can do is to set up your project or your innovation for success in the market post-project. Then you can have a strategy near the end of your project for marketing and commercialization. So you can't have a lot of activities relating to business development as such or marketing, but you can set it up for success after. However, you will have to do an exploitation plan, which is showing that you're developing relationships for business development, as kind of business development for after the project. So then you've got those customers lined up for after. So you can't kind of pay for marketing campaigns or SEO, all that kind of thing, but you can set yourself up for success and doing those kind of activities throughout for the exploitation, commercialization part, which are building the relationships, and at the end, creating those strategies.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so for the next few slides, what I wanted to show was the types of innovation grants that are available for SMEs. So I've mentioned Innovate UK. If you Google Innovate UK and then IFS, which stands for the Innovation Funding Service, it will take you to this page, the innovation competitions. So here you'll be able to kind of look around as to the open competition which is available, so the Smart Grant, but also the themed competitions as well. So here I've taken a screenshot of the page recently. So here we've got the Creative Catalyst 2024. So this is a themed competition because it's around the creative industries, and the creative industries is also a priority area for grants at the moment as well. So that's a really good place to start for innovation grants. Also, we've got KTN, which is the Knowledge Transfer Network. And because there's just so many grants available, this helps to categorise and navigate all of the grants under the UKRI umbrella. So that's UK or United Kingdom Research and Innovation, and Innovate UK is part of UKRI. So UKRI spans across research councils as well. So there's other funding sources. So this helps to categorize where you can find funding, but it does grant funding, but also helps you navigate where to go for events and relevant networks and newsletters and accelerators. So it's a really, really good source if you're looking at finding innovation grants.
Thank you. So we've had a question from Molly, and she's asking whether there are grants available to fund businesses actually attending events. She's given an example of medica.
Yes, yeah, there are grants actually available for that. On my social media on LinkedIn, I've put a couple of links to those recently. So one I think is sometimes they are around specific events. I think one was around transport that I posted a couple of days ago. But for medica, I'm just trying to think. I think there was another link, but there are grants available for attending events, but there's very sort of specific criteria as to what the funding is eligible for.
And would you find those on the websites that you're talking about here?
To be honest, I find them through the newsletters. So if you were to, I just don't think which one I would probably go into. If there's medicine, maybe biotechnology, health, just trying to think anything other relevant. I don't think so. So maybe kind of across those two, if you were to sign up for those newsletters, then it would tell you about those sort of different types of grants, like traveling to events.
Thank you.
Okay, so another way to look at what's available for grant funding, but also other non-dilutive funding sources, maybe like an accelerator or loans, those kind of things, as well as equity funding and investment and things. There are two hubs or two platforms which are really useful. So here you can see the 𝘄𝗵𝗁 logo and also Innovate UK. And one is No Limits and the other is Innovation Hub. So there's kind of similarities between the both of them, but the direction that 𝘄𝗵𝗁 is going into is being there more for your holistic funding needs. So it has a broader range of sources to go for, but also it can direct you into like local business support and different events, and there's just so much on there, like training, all that kind of thing. So it's a really good source for innovation grants, but also those broader areas as well. And here we have a few sources for the European grants. So we've got Horizon Europe, Eurostars, and the European Innovation Council Accelerator, which you might have heard as EIC. So the EIC is similar to the Smart Grant in that it's quite open in terms of the industries and the innovations which you can apply for through that. However, it's very competitive, just like the Smart Grant. So the Horizon Europe website is very comprehensive, but it can be a bit challenging to navigate it. So if you want to kind of have a look at that, then I would put aside at least half an hour, 45 minutes to kind of get through it and get to where you need to go. Then we've got just a couple of examples of the themed competitions, particularly for the government departments. So we've got a ministry example here. So we've got the Ministry of Defence. So they've got 𝘵𝗲𝗃, which is a defence and security accelerator. So this is an open call, and this is open quite frequently. But there's other accelerators which are available, and other calls from the Ministry of Defence, but they are very specific. So they do this open call, but they also do very sort of specific calls as well. And then we've got the government websites. So as an example, DEFRA, which is the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. There's lots of funding coming up in farming this year. And just an example of what is open right now is the Farming Equipment and Technology Fund 2024. So as you can see here, it's very, very specific funding with specific criteria, which kind of goes into what that department is trying to achieve.
How long do businesses have to apply? So once these are announced?
Well, with the open call for innovation, that's open quite frequently. So you don't have to be so choosy about your timing, in that if it comes available, we have to kind of do it immediately. And that's also similar for the SMART grant, because it's open pretty much all year round. But sometimes you only have maybe about a month, 2 months, more towards 2 months, I think, for some of these competitions, specifically the themed competitions. If you were to prepare your grant ahead of time and what you're looking to achieve, and that you are looking out for a particular competition, that means that you can kind of jump on it and apply for it a lot more sort of quickly. So having done that prep work ahead of time for the grant, that can really pay off. We have other sources which aren't really sort of too well utilised, particularly Finder grants. So I'll come on to that in a minute. So I mentioned the 𝗵𝗶s and local council funding. So we've got the Milton Keynes City Council here. Sometimes they have grants that come up. So checking your local council is a good source for funding, and because the 𝗵𝗶 sort of network is changing, then it's likely that that is going to reflect what they can offer and what's available on their website, particularly coming up in the next sort of couple of months. Then we've got the Department for Business and Trade. So this shows broader finance and support for your business, very similar to No Limits and the Innovation Hub. And Finder Grant is a really good source, and it's another one that you can sign up for to have notifications. So there is a really good one available there at the moment if your business is interested in AI, because there's the AI Upskill Fund, and this is at the expression of interest point, which is where it's just kind of feeling out whether it's a grant that people want. So if you want to help ensure that this is available, then if you apply, then if they have a lot of interest in it, then they will likely put it into a fund that you can apply for. And also the 𝗵𝗶 network that I've mentioned, these are changing, so definitely check your local area, because they are a good source of funding for innovation, but for other types of funding like capital expenditure.
Thank you. So we have a great question here from Mark, asking about how likely are UK companies to get grants from Horizon Europe now that we aren't part of the EU?
Yeah, so that is a good question. So the UK is a member of the Horizon Europe now. There was a bit of a it was kind of up in the air really for about 2 years, but now we're part of it. We have got a good chance of getting that funding.
Thank you. And a question from 𝗵𝗶𝗶, sorry if I've mispronounced your name. Can pre-revenue small firms get a large grant depending on the idea or proposition?
So it's really important that you have the match funding available, because if you were to be awarded the funding, particularly for Innovate UK, because you'll get 70% of the grant, sort of typically for large amounts. So you need to have that match funding available, which will be 30% of the grant in the business bank account. So you need to prove that you've got the funds available to do the project. So if you're a small firm pre-revenue, then there might be kind of different sources of where you get that match funding from. So it could be something that you look at when you're having discussions, particularly with angel investors or VC, if you want to kind of ring fence part of their investment for match funding for grants. It might be you get funding from maybe friends and family. There's lots of different ways of kind of getting that match funding, but the main point here is really that it's available in the bank. So when they do the due diligence, that is there kind of upfront.
Thank you. So a question from Molly on who was offering the AI Upskill Fund?
Who's offering that? It's the government. So you can sign up for an account. I think it's the Gateway Government, something along that kind of line. But it's easy to set up an account. I did the expression of interest recently. It's super easy to apply for, in that it's almost like a Google form, sort of through their website. But if you were to go and find a grant and put in AI upskill fund, then you should find it in that, and then it will guide you through to setting up an account.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so one aspect of innovation grants is the myths and the misconceptions. So these are things I've sort of heard over, last 10 years. So grants is a revenue. So grants are there to help you succeed in your project. So it's really, all that money is ring fenced to go into that particular project. So it's not really a form of revenue. Also, that grants can be taken back, if you don't spend it all, because it's free money. So it doesn't work like a loan. They don't pay anything up front, or the way that it works with a grant is that you've done a project plan, you've almost committed to the structure of the project in work packages, and they're expecting you to spend the money as you've set out in your project plan. So the project should run to time and to budget, and none of it is really sort of taken back or anything like that, because it's there to do that job of funding the project, because you've kind of promised those project outcomes and deliverables. So they want to make sure that it's going to work. Grants can be used for anything. So there are particular forms of funding, or there's particular costs for within grants. So labour is eligible. Subcontractors, usually it's about sort of 30% threshold of the overall project amount. So everything in the project has to be justified as to why you're using it. So why is that team working on it? Why did you use that particular subcontractor? If you want materials, what are you using them for? And it's line by line kind of explanation and pricing as well. So the detail that goes into the financing is there's a lot of work that has to go into the finance sheets for the development of the grant application. Also, the innovation grants can pay for expensive capital expenditure and rent. So because it's R&D, they want to see a lot of the funding go towards the people and upskilling and the know-how and the doing of the innovation, rather than the costs being put onto expensive machinery or equipment and that kind of thing. So to kind of get around that, what you can do is rent machines, because that would be eligible. Or if you needed to buy something, maybe part of it could be in the grant project, but the majority is paid for outside the project. Also, grants can only be accessed when in financial difficulty. So that's not really the case, because innovation grants are there to help your business grow and to stimulate that innovation, rather than to be sort of put in at a point when your business is in that financial difficulty. But that also might kind of sort of be flagged up in that due diligence point if you were to be awarded the grant as well. And that might influence whether you can have access to it. Grants aren't available anymore. There's so many different grants available, as I've kind of just shown, in terms of the different types and the sources as well. So there's a lot of innovation grant funding available at the moment. And also, to win grants, you need to have a lobbyist. So there's not really a need to have a lobbyist, or kind of consider that sort of political sort of side to things, mainly because the grant applications are assessed by 5 assessors for Innovate UK, and it's sort of done blindly. So it shouldn't really, I mean, your application isn't anonymized, but that's kind of what's done from their side, so you don't know who's assessed it. But there shouldn't really be that sort of, that influence behind whether you get it or not.
So, sorry, you don't need particular connections or that kind of
No.
thing when you're applying for a grant?
Yeah. So there's no kind of there's no sort of nepotism there, where they know you and they kind of favour you or anything like that, because of the number of assessors that are on it. That's to kind of mitigate things like that. So, but also if you're kind of worried about a competitor, if you think that they might be assessing grant applications, then you can request that particular companies can't see or aren't part of that assessment criteria. Sorry, they're not an assessor. So usually assessors apply to evaluate particular grants. So, if someone has a particular expertise in an area, then they might be chosen to assess particular grants. So if you're worried about any conflict of interest or anything like that, then that's something that you can write to them about ahead of time.
Thank you. Okay, so 𝗵𝗵𝗁 has a question on the last point that you were discussing, actually. So they're asking, does it matter whether one applies for a grant directly or hires an agency, which will then charge some sort of fee or commission?
It's totally up to you. If you've got the skill and resource and the time to be able to write a grant application, there's kind of different ways that you can use a grant consultancy. So you can write it yourself, and then you have a grant writer or grant consultant review your application, or they can upskill you to help you write the application, and they might review it as well. Or they can write it. So it's up to you. I probably would get some quotes from different agencies and kind of go with the one that best fit you and kind of how you feel about working with that particular company.
So worth doing your research, really.
Definitely, yeah.
Great. So I have a question actually about, you've mentioned the due diligence process a few times. What should companies expect going through that?
There is a video on the Innovate UK YouTube channel, which is all about the project setup. There's kind of audits and that kind of thing that's part of it. So I probably would look at that video, which maybe we could send out if we're kind of sending the recording out, just a kind of link to it, because there's quite a bit in it.
Yeah, we can add that in. Great, thank you. So I have a question from Rebecca. So she's asking whether you know if having a business contract in place with Innovate UK and getting a grant from them would be a conflict of interest.
I guess it kind of depends on what that business contract is and if there's any overlap in that grant project. So I'm not really sure. But if you want to, we can have a chat after. So we do a free consultation for half an hour. We'll share the link at the end, but maybe we can kind of talk about that in a bit more detail.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so what I wanted to kind of show here was the different types of eligible innovation projects. So very early stage projects are, TRL 1 to 2. So what TRL is a technology readiness level, and these were developed by NASA to assess the maturity of the innovation of their space technology. And this has been adopted quite widely since, I think, the sort of 60s and 70s when this came available. So very early stage, very basic research is TRL 1 to 2. And the type of projects that would describe this kind of activity would be fundamental research, or possibly a bit later on to TRL 2 to sort of 3 would be feasibility studies. So a feasibility study is this actually going to work? And that could be the main focus of the project. So the next TRL is 3 to 6, and this is kind of the sweet spot for innovation grants, because you've already shown that you've got the basic research out the way, and you kind of want to take it up to a prototype level, or you want to kind of test it in an operational environment. So these are kind of, this is where feasibility studies would be helping to develop the innovation from sort of around 3 to about maybe sort of 5 or 6. But if you did an industrial research, that would mature the innovation much more, because you would not only be able to show that the technology works, but it also works in the environment that you're going to introduce it to after the project. So that's where you might do user testing, or maybe work with a supplier or a customer to see how people are actually using that particular technology. And then after that, you've got TRL 7 to 9. So 9 is the top of the scale, and this is where the product is pretty much ready to go into the market. So it's had all of that testing from a technical perspective. It's been built. It's pretty much, it could be a full system. So this is experimental research because it's much closer to market. So feasibility studies, industrial research, these are around 70% grant funded, but experimental research is 45%, just because there's a lot less R&D, innovation stuff happening, because it's a much more mature innovation. So I kind of wanted to give an overview of that, just because it kind of helps explain this one. One way that you could look at grants is how to get the most from it by almost having them in a roadmap. So you could have your product roadmap, and then you could kind of work out what grants would be good at what point. So if we were, for example, looking ahead here, then I might have something which is very early stage, and you know, I might be a PhD student, I might be a researcher. So in that context, looking at fundamental research or feasibility study would be good to have funded by a research council, because it's very early stage. It's kind of TRL 1, TRL 2. And then as it's developed over a couple of years, then what I might want to do is then go for a themed competition to mature it further up to that kind of TRL 6. So then that's where I'll do industrial research, because I might want to test how that particular innovation works in a particular environment. So that's where I might then want to go for a themed competition to test that innovation. And then I might deploy it, and then I think, you know, I wonder how that would work in a different market, or you know, what would that look like if it had this technology on it. So then that might be where I use something like a themed competition or a smart grant to do another industrial research project later. So having a grant strategy is important, just so you're not kind of going for almost opportunistic grants, because with the smart grant, that is really good, but you know, as I mentioned, it's very competitive, and it's not the only one. So it's good to kind of have a good understanding as to the grants landscape and how they could be used, you know, in this kind of roadmap sort of structure. Okay, so we're kind of running out of time. I think we've only got 4 minutes left. So this is really briefly, I just kind of wanted to show you different types of eligibility criteria. So this is on the Innovate UK website for the Smart Grant, and it does have a tab about eligibility. So here I just kind of wanted to give you an idea as to what to look out for. So here, if you were designing a project, it must start by this date, it must end by this particular date, include XYZ. Like, it's very sort of specific, but I wanted to kind of show an example of some of that eligibility criteria. So if you're looking at applying for a grant, it's important to look at eligibility and scope before you think about applying for it as well. And also the size of the project and the length of the project is something that you need to kind of take into consideration. I think we've kind of covered this with the question earlier, but yeah, there's different ways of doing grants. Do it yourself, upskill, or kind of delegate to someone else. So in terms of navigating the application process, so very quickly, having a strategy, as kind of mentioned in that roadmap, and preparing your ideas ahead of time, maybe even having those conversations with universities, suppliers, subcontractors, then sort of scout for opportunities, then kind of choose the one that you would be most eligible for, and that would sort of tally up with your business strategy, and then you would put together the application and then submit it. And for Innovate UK, you can submit the same application twice, but also you can put it in for one, and then if it didn't succeed, take that feedback and then maybe go for a different competition as well. So you get 2 goes out of one project or one application. And kind of thinking about what a good grant project would look like, it would need, so the right project, so that means it's got the right level of innovation in it, and it might kind of be a type of project that we mentioned earlier, so feasibility study or industrial research. It's the right competitions, so you've got the right level of innovation being developed in the project for that particular competition, so the outputs kind of marry up with what your company wants to achieve and also what the grant itself wants to achieve, and that you're the right business to be doing it. So you've got a good team, and you've got that much funding available, so you're in a good position to do it. So we've only got a minute left, we might have to wrap up. But this one here is just kind of explaining the match funding model, just because it can be quite confusing, and just some suggestions for that match funding. So it could come from advanced funding, a loan in principle, equity, reinvesting profits. So there's quite a few options.
I think we've answered a lot of questions already, so
we have,
I think we're okay.
Yeah. So just briefly, at MPA we offer end-to-end services. So we have the Grant Kickstarter, which is a training course in how to strategize your grants and how grants work in much more detail. We offer a grant matching report, so this helps to scope or scout out really opportunities and if it will be a good fit for your business and the project that you have in mind. We also do different levels of assistance with grants, so we can review it, we can coach you and upskill you, and we can write it for you, and if you were to win it, we do project management coaching. So if you, I think we might send this out as well, but yeah, if you want to just take a picture of this, you can scan it to book in a free 30-minute consultation, just to kind of talk about the grants that you have in mind, projects that you might be thinking about, and what would be a good fit and maybe how we could support you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining us. We'll send out all of the slides, you'll get a recording of this session, and of course, please, as Chloe has said, use the link to book in for a consultation. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much.